Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 65. And as of the release date of this episode, we have another Pokemon game being released, Pokemon Sword and Shield, which is, I believe, Generation 9, Generation 8 now, Generation 8. And another release in a series that, since its first release over 20 years ago, has been a huge, pervasive part of the industry.
Yeah, Pokemon's been around a long time, and Geoff and I have both been fans of it since the very beginning, pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it's really interesting. This is also the first one that's going to be on a home console, because mostly they debuted on the Game Boy and have been on portable consoles since. Although technically the Switch is a portable console, which is really interesting. Also, not the first Pokemon game on Switch. We got the re-release of Pokemon Yellow, essentially. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Which,
right.
But that's not considered the core series because it's a remaster, essentially, a re-release of an older version of the game with some updates.
Yeah. It's sort of it's sort of an adaptation of Pokemon Go through the lens of Pokemon Yellow rather than a re-release. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a series that I guess we can talk about our beginnings with it first. For me, I actually didn't play it on the Game Boy first. I got it on the Game Boy a little bit after it came out. I'd first played it on emulator on the PC. A friend of mine had an emulator and a Japanese version of Pocket Monsters Green that we both played and could trade by bringing floppy disks over to each other's house. I'm really old, guys. And that was my earliest experience with it, and it seemed so interesting to me. And once and then another friend of mine sold me his old Game Boy when he got a Game Boy Color, and so I went back and bought Blue, I believe, and played it on the Game Boy for the first time. And I've been a fan of the series since.
Yeah, mine's a little different. I didn't do the emulator route. I remember. I mean, I grew up playing the Game Gear as a handheld. I'd had it since I was 8, and that was sort of what I really got into. But in the 6th grade, I remember one of the kids in my class is showing me this game because we were just talking about handheld stuff. He's like, "This is the most amazing thing ever." And he let me play it for a couple of minutes. And I don't remember what part of the game it was, but I remember exactly where I was outside of my middle school when I first played it.
Right.
And just the very idea of how much customization you had and how like big and wild and weird. Like there's how many Pokemon to catch? Oh my God. And so I saved up my allowance, and this was around the time when they were getting ready to announce the Game Boy Color. So Toys R Us was selling Game Boy Pockets for $50. And it had been long enough that they were I don't remember exactly how long after the initial release of Pokemon I got it. But I was able to, my mother agreed to buy the game if I bought the Game Boy. So they had a Game Boy Pocket that was the same exact blue as Pokemon Blue.
Nice.
And I don't think the red matched, or it was a bit of that and a bunch of other kids had red and no one had blue. So I got it. And that was so I had the cartridge and the Game Boy that matched, and that cartridge did not come out of that replaced by anything else for at least 3 or 4 months. And yeah, I've been a sucker for it ever since.
Yeah, it's funny. My relationship with Pokemon is really interesting. So, a thing that Geoff and I want to talk about is because we've talked about JRPGs on the show before, and Pokemon, of course, did come up. But, Pokemon is not like your standard JRPG. I mean, for one, the mechanic that's focused is the catching mechanic, catching the different Pokemon, collecting them all. There's still training and leveling up, which is standard to a JRPG, and the story is fairly standard for a JRPG. But the catching mechanic kind of changes it a bit, and the interchangeability of party members, essentially. The only other game I can think that comes close is something like Chrono Cross, where you can get 100 characters in that game, or whatever the number was.
It's 45 in Chrono Cross. The Suikoden series is the one that does the 108 Stars of Destiny.
That's right. Probably I was conflating the two, but RPGs like that, they allow you to get a huge amount of party members, which is uncommon in JRPGs. For the most part, it's a party of 10 or less, with some minor exceptions. And Pokemon, it's there were 150, 151, right, in the original game. And
yes.
And that's an insane amount of things. And you couldn't catch all 151 without both games, which has kind of stayed true for collecting them all since, is that you need both copies of the game because there are certain Pokemon that are exclusive to each version.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting from a collector's standpoint, because if you like doing that kind of a thing, like this hits that button really hard.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons why it works so well for Pokemon to be able to have that large of a potential party pool is the fact that all of them have the same recruitment parameters, essentially. Catch them.
Yeah.
It's not having certain conversations necessarily, unless you're dealing with legendaries or one-of-a-kinds. But once they're in your party, it's not as if you get different dialogue options based on them. It's not, the storyline is not based off of their interaction with the story. It is entirely your interaction with them as members of your party. So that you're able to get a much larger pool, because stuff like Chrono Cross or other large party RPGs, I'm thinking of Final Fantasy VI as another example, with a grand total of 14 people you can have in your party. 14! But because they all have, varied stories and deep beats and everything else, you bring certain people, not necessarily because they're the strongest member to have in the party, but because you like having them as part of your story. And over the years and generations of Pokemon, people have developed those kinds of bonds with these digital creatures, but that's more of a thing of having favorites and less of a, oh man, you get a really funny dialogue option if you bring a Lickitung to the Bellsprout Tower or something.
Yeah. Which, if that were the case, would be hilarious. I'm sure Lickitung, like going back to our Detective Pikachu episode, the scene where he's on the bus going to, I think, to see what happened to his father, and the Lickitung comes up to him and just licks him and then moves on. Right. Is like, yeah, I could see that Pokemon doing that. I mean, what else would it do, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's the thing is, one of the criticisms about Pokemon is how little the story evolves, but the fact is, the great stories are the ones you come up with based on the Pokemon you have with you and the experience you create for yourself.
Yeah, it was funny. So my spouse, the incredible Sarah, went with me to see Detective Pikachu because I wanted to see it so bad. She thought it was okay. She's not really a Pokemon fan, so a lot of it went over her head. But she does have a working knowledge of Pokemon. Very recently, I was listening to an EP by the nerdcore rapper Super Smack, who is a dude that I just interviewed on one of my other podcasts. His new EP is called Neon Red. It's all Nintendo-based songs or samples Nintendo music. And he has a song called Battle Up that samples the original 8-bit Pokemon battle theme. And he does a rap about Pokemon. He sings as a Squirtle because Squirtle's his favorite. And then he does a Spitfire rap of all the types. But the reason I'm bringing this up is we're listening to the song in the car. And when Super Smack is like speaking as Squirtle to himself, he's speaking as a Squirtle does, saying its name over and over again. And Sarah out of the blue goes, so let me get this straight. Pokemon can only say their name? And I quickly go, yes. And then I think for a second, I go, but there are exceptions. Like Meowth can actually talk in the cartoon because he's a special kind of Meowth. And some other Pokemon can actually speak, like Mewtwo can speak telekinetically to anybody. And like Sarah puts her hand up, she's like, I get it. Thanks. Like, not to be rude, but like, I just wanted to know yes or no. I don't need the lore. And I'm like, that's fair.
That's fair. Although it's very funny because of Pokemon's status as this, I guess, elder statesman of a series, and due to its original tagline being "Gotta catch 'em all," which, incidentally, I don't think has been a part of the marketing for a long time. Its evergreen status is purely due to the fans always saying it at this point.
Yeah.
But because of that, you have to build the information and all the trappings of each Pokemon on top of the original ones, because you can update things, but then there's other stuff that if you touch it, as much as it's a good idea to update things, people are going to lose their goddamn minds. And one of those is the Pokemon Cries. One of the very impressive things, especially when you consider the size of an original Game Boy cartridge, is not only did they fit data for 151 different Pokemon, they gave each of them a distinctive cry, a distinct sound that they make when they enter battle.
Right.
Now, if you aren't paying attention, it all just becomes a lot of glitch sounds. But people are able to, you can play Name That Pokemon entirely by their cry. And it's fantastic that nowadays, we're getting things on the Switch, so many console generations after the fact. And you still throw out a Bulbasaur and it's still going to make this weird kind of, beeps and boops sound because that's what Bulbasaur sounds like, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, we were talking about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee earlier, and those two Pokemon specifically are voiced by their voice actors from the cartoons, but just those Pokemon. And so Pikachu and Eevee both sound like they do in the cartoon, saying their own name. Mm-hmm. But the other Pokemon in that game don't. They still have the digital cries. It's very interesting to me. Also, forgive me, there's construction going on outside my window. I have limited control over that. Yay, living in Brooklyn. Anyway.
Yeah, is the thing. But yeah, no, and the thing is, like, having Pikachu and Eevee having voiced clips is sort of an acceptable exception since they are they're going to be part of your party pretty much the entire game in this release. Much like Pokemon Yellow, you could put Pikachu in the box, but Pikachu is the only one that will follow you outside of their Pokeball.
Right.
And so it's acceptable there. And the other is the fact that, look, I haven't watched the Pokemon anime since 6th, 7th grade when it was on at 7:30 in the morning on WB, and I would watch it before I would leave for school. I would watch it before heading to the bus stop. I'd catch the tail end of Sailor Moon to watch Pokemon. That was the last time I saw that.
Right.
So you could, you could have anybody walk in off the street and make the Pokemon noises, and I'll go, yeah, that's probably what they say in the anime. That's probably true. And I think pop culture osmosis, a lot of people feel the same way. So it's like, okay, yeah, you could try to voice all of them, but Pikachu and Eevee.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be against them putting the voices in it, considering a game like Fire Emblem came out this year that had so many different voice actors saying so many different things. Like, it's not like we can't do it, but I'm kind of on the fence on whether I want it or not. And it's funny talking about the anime. For the record, as we are like 10 to 15 minutes into this episode, we are talking about the games. I know there's a card game. I know there's a cartoon. I know there are movies. Well, we may mention them, but like...
I think we should, but not right now.
Well, right. And the expertise is on the games. Although I do feel guilty not watching the show based on the Alolan region because we have a mutual friend, Abe Goldfarb, who voices Professor Queequeg. I think that's how it's pronounced. The professor of that Pokemon region.
I always said it Kukui, but also I've never heard it said because I haven't watched it. Sorry, Abe.
Sorry, Abe. We love you.
Notice me, senpai, seriously, but I also am not watching that show.
No, yeah, same.
But I also, in talking of personal connection to Pokemon and personal things, I realize that my story's a little off.
Okay.
Slightly. Because of the fact that now I did play Gen 1, and I'm not a full-on Gen 1er.
Me neither.
If you don't know what that is, look it up.
Yeah.
But it's not offensive or anything. It's just annoying. But I got to that, and then I was behind enough on Game Boy consoles. Like, I would always buy the latest one right when they announced that a new one was coming out. Mm-hmm. So right when all support would go out the window. So I got a Game Boy Pocket right before the Game Boy Color came out. And I got a Game Boy Color, a month before the Game Boy Advance happened. So I didn't get Gold and Silver. And I ended up just sort of falling out of Pokemon for a little while. And I didn't get back into it. And it sort of retroactively feels like I've always been with it because of how hard I got back into the franchise. I didn't get back into it until college when Diamond and Pearl were coming out. And my friend Greg, who listens to the podcast, hi Greg, was like, so this is coming out and I'm going to get Pearl. Do you want to get Diamond? And I was a broke college student, and we worked out a thing where he helped me get Diamond. I helped him get a recording interface. It doesn't matter. Long story, but the long and the short of it is I ended up with a copy of Pokemon Diamond, and I got to enjoy 3 generations worth of improvements and all kinds of jumps ahead and whatnot. And now looking back, Platinum is the superior version of the game in that generation, but it wasn't out at that point. And not only was it this like night and day, oh my God, we've gone so far from a Game Boy cartridge that used so many strange and masterful programming strokes that it was barely held together, that you could glitch everything, that you now have like, oh, there's new types and the moves have divided and everything else. But the bigger thing was realizing how many other people at my college were super into Pokemon. And getting to have this thing of like, okay, one of the other things that made me fall out of it was when the Pokemon card game came out. I was an avid Magic the Gathering player at the time, and getting Pokemon, it was like, all right, this just feels like easy mode Magic the Gathering. And I am a sophisticated 12-year-old boy with intelligence and discretion, and I am above such plebeian rule sets. This is not tapping for mana. I shall leave this behind. And so you get that kid game mindset. And you know what? Screw it. It's a kid game. But it's a really good kid game. Not the card game. I can't speak about the card game now. I'm sure it's actually very deep and wild and varied. But like I had this wonderful, like, smacked upside the head with, you never left Pokemon, and Pokemon never left you. And it didn't leave a lot of people. Let's enjoy it again. And I've, like, kept up on every generation since, and you bet your ass I'm playing my copy of Sword.
So it's funny, our holes are actually identical, which is very strange. So I started with a copy of Blue. I played Green on the PC on an emulator, but back before I knew any better and knew that it was wrong. Cough, cough. But
which I'm not gonna lie, dude, I haven't commented on this. Playing the Japanese game on an emulator, hardcore.
Yeah.
Dude,
it was. I had a Filipino friend named Roy who was like the gamer nerd who got me. He's the one who got me into Chrono Trigger as well, and like he knew the ins and outs of the PC community before I did. Like it's because of him I like the game Red Alert and any like real time strategy. That's a whole other story. But we have the same holes because, like I said, I got a Game Boy pretty late and I got a copy of Blue, and then I skipped. I didn't get Gold or Silver. I still, to this day, have never played any version of Gold or Silver. I just never got around to it. And then I didn't play Ruby and Sapphire either originally. I did, however, buy a copy of Omega Ruby and play that. So I did still eventually get to play Gen 2. But I didn't get back into it till Diamond and Pearl when my friend Andrew was like, hey, I'm getting Diamond. Do you want to get Pearl? In a similar fashion. And I got really back into the series again. And then I played everything after that. I played Black and White 2. I played X and Y, I think, was my favorite of any generation. Not necessarily because the Pokemon were my favorite, but definitely, although I did love my starter, but mostly because I loved the story. I didn't love Sun and Moon, and then I'm really excited for the new one for Sword and Shield. I am, of course, getting Sword because I want my leek-wielding, fancy knight duck boy.
I'm doing the same. Farfetch'd. We're gonna do this question later, but Farfetch'd has been my favorite Pokemon forever. So yeah. I've wanted an evolution, a pre-evolution, a mega evolution. I've wanted something for this stupid duck for over 20 years. I know I'm not alone in being so excited about it, but yeah. Also, I think X and Y was kind of my favorite too for a lot of reasons, and some superficial ones too. Like I really enjoyed all the outfit options and getting to roller skate. You could do tricks with it. I loved it.
Yeah. It's interesting also because so I have a favorite starter, and then of all the starters ever, and then I have several favorite Pokemon. It's hard for me to narrow it down to just one favorite.
No, that's fair because there's so many Pokemon at this point that you can have a favorite type of Pokemon. For those who are not huge Pokemon fans or aficionado, every Pokemon can have one or two types about them, essentially elemental affinities. And when you go and face bosses and fight the gym leaders, they will have their particular type that they like to use. And a lot of us have that same thing. But also our favorite Pokemon could be different. Our favorite looking, our favorite one to use, our favorite Pokemon from each generation, are the one that we have the fondest memories of from whatever run through. Like, I don't know many people that have a singularly focused favorite. I can think of one off the top of my head, a person who has a singular favorite, but I think for most of us, there's a list and a litany.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that for me, the favorite that I'm known for, just because I talk about him the most, is of course one of the original starters, Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur is easily one of my favorites, and like I have a shirt with Bulbasaur and his evolutions on it. I have a 3D printed Bulbasaur planter that the incredible Holly Ween provided me with, which was super cool. You know, it is not a secret that I love that Pokemon and his evolution line. But anyway, yeah, I think that it's hard to narrow it down because there's so many. And I'm at a point now, like, there's a little bit of drama with the new Pokemon game that not every Pokemon is going to be available from every generation ever because space, they're claiming, and other things. Some people are mad about it, but as someone who, A, barely in any of the games have caught them all because I just don't have the wherewithal, and B, don't know that I could catch over 1,000 Pokemon. Like, I think that them not including everything is fine. I'm excited for the new stuff. I'm excited for the new story, the new area. But a lot of people are outraged because they're so tied to the old games, and that's what they grew up loving. I mean, also, we're not strangers to discussing gamers being unreasonable on this podcast anyway. So
no,
that.
We are not.
But like, it doesn't really bother me that much.
No, nor me. And maybe when I have the game in my hands and I'm playing through it, I'll have other reasons to be upset or not. But yeah, it is what it is. And I think one of the other things for me is the fact that due to a lot of the designs of the Pokemon or the idea of the type, the different typings and type advantages that they have over each other and whatnot, it allows for an easy and sometimes very addicting transition into other kinds of games. I play my 3DS every single day that I can because I have 2 free-to-play Pokemon puzzle games on it. And it's Pokemon Picross and Pokemon Shuffle. And Pokemon Shuffle is the only match 3 like Candy Crush style game that I play. I've tried other ones and I'm like, yeah, I see the appeal. Pokemon, every level is a different Pokemon. They are of a certain type. You make a team of other ones that you have caught. If you beat a level, you're not guaranteed to catch the Pokemon. You still have a catching mini game with it. And yes, there are things that are using resources and whatnot, but you also can level up your individual Pokemon. They have alternate abilities. You get items, and like it is its own weird, deep RPG that is also Candy Crush. And it was a definite instance of I understood Pokemon very well, and then my friend Sherwin showed me this game, and I'm like, oh, so you do this, and then this happens, and oh, I'm in real trouble here.
It's always nice when you can recognize when something's about to take over your life forever.
Mm-hmm. And I've gone through a couple of 3DSs due to water damage and tech failures. And my current game of Pokemon Shuffle, I was not able to transfer over all of my data. So I had to start from scratch on a freemium game. And I'm making a game effort of it, man. I'm trying.
Yeah, I went through several 3DSs as well. The shoulder buttons weren't meant to last, and like they would eventually die, and I'd move on to a new one. I'm praying that doesn't happen with the Switch since I take it everywhere. And so far, knock on wood, it hasn't. I've had to deal with drift only once so far, but that's it. And so I'm super thankful.
I'm dealing with
that.
some real bad drift right now. I'm gonna have to get my stuff fixed up.
Well, thankfully, if you reach out to Nintendo, they'll give you like a packing slip, and they repair it for free now. So.
Oh yeah, no, they got a whole nice thing set up, but it's just like I got to do it now.
Right, of course, it takes time. I think what makes me really excited about the newest generation of Pokemon is that it is going to be on home console, but still portable. I didn't love the last mainline game, which was the Alolan region, which was Sun and Moon. I played it for a while. I thought it was okay. I don't know, something about. It's funny. I'm one of those weirdos who likes the story in his Pokemon games. I know a lot.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people, for the most part, I get the sense, care more about the capturing and less about the story. But I think what brings me back to X and Y and Black and White 2 is that they had such incredible stories. And I like that. It keeps me engaged in the world. And the Alolan game, I'm sure it gets better, but at least in the early 2 to 3 hours, like I just wasn't hooked. And so I didn't stay interested. And so I'm really excited about Sword and Shield because like I don't know a ton about the story. I hear it's very good. I'm really excited about it. And also I'm obsessed with my Nintendo Switch, as it's no secret to our listeners, so that will help probably as well.
I imagine. Well, when Pokemon Sun and Moon came out, I got to do something that honestly I'm shocked it was the first time I'd ever done it. It was I and a bunch of friends all realized we were super excited about it. It's like, all right, enough folks were getting either Sun or Moon. It wasn't like, one person needs to cover the difference. So pick the one you like. We all like pre-ordered it, so we all got it on the same day. A bunch of those friends all meet at a makerspace in Brooklyn. And it's one that my wife, Sarah, goes to every week. And it's usually when I hang out with them, it's there. So I got my copy. We all hung out at Resistor. And we all started Pokemon Sun and Moon at the same time all together. Like we all, or like we started a little bit beforehand. I honestly, this is the first time I ever like kept resetting my 3DS until I got a female starter, just because I wanted to try that for once.
Right.
And so we all hung out in like a loungy kind of space. We all went to lunch together with our 3DSs. And we had like, all right, who caught this? Who wants to trade that? Like we were trading, we were battling, we were all like, which island challenge are you on? And it's very funny because several of those friends after the fact were like, this is not a very good Pokemon game. but you know what? We all had a really good time that day. And it was a wonderful communal experience. And I hope the Switch version allows for even more of that.
Well, yeah, what I'm excited about with the raid battles is that you'll be able to battle Pokemon with other people. And like the thing I like, I know people love or hate Pokemon Go, although for the most part, people love it. What I loved about it as a Pokemon fan is even though it was overly simplistic, is that it got people into a series that they might not have had an entry point otherwise. And it was super communal. That first 2 or 3 months that Pokemon Go was out, I wandered my neighborhood constantly. I would run into my friend Alex all the time, and she and I would walk around the neighborhood just catching Pokemon and chatting and stopping at Pokestops. Like,
yeah, I rather liked Pokemon Go, and something that can really be said, in my opinion, can be said in Pokemon's favor, is how easily reducible it is.
Yeah.
Like how you can boil it down to its quintessence and it is still Pokemon, which is why it translates well to several other genres and styles and games. Some people might call that overly simplistic, but you can obfuscate and complicate. We've seen that in the mainline games. But I'm not sure if I ever told my Pokemon Go story on air. And that is when the game first came out, I was very excited about it. I was having difficulty with how much data and battery it was using, but this was in the summer and I was working outside in Central Park, so I was catching some stuff. And I had it for about 2 days or so. And I was home at my apartment in Upper Manhattan right by a park. And I was like, let me go see what I can find. Like just kind of goofing off. I found a few things in my building and I was wandering a little bit, and I'm a New Yorker, so I'm used to looking at my phone, but also not walking into things.
Right.
I'm usually pretty successful at it. I'd say 99% of the time. And I'm looking and I'm kind of going and I'm chasing down. It was probably like a Nidoran or something, like just small, but I was excited about it. And I put down my phone like for just a second to check my surroundings, and like just about exactly where that Pokemon was a skunk.
Oh no.
Not a Skuntank Pokemon, an actual goddamn skunk. Now, I don't remember exactly what position that skunk was in. Maybe it's because it was like climbing down from a pile of something, but it looked like its head was down and its tail was up. because all I know is I have never noped the fuck out of any situation harder than that.
Yeah.
I then deleted Pokemon Go.
That's really funny. That's awesome. Yeah.
Know thy limits.
So yeah, I would not mess with a skunk. I have a friend who's been sprayed. It took like days and days to get that scent out of everything. So
my dog, my German Shepherd got sprayed when I was a kid. Oh my God.
it's awful.
Deep coats, man.
Right, exactly. All right, well, I think we've delayed on this long enough, but I wanted to go through each generation of the main generations and mention which starter we chose, because I counted up, and what's interesting is because I skipped one generation, I'm an even, and without the newest generation, I'm an even 3-3 split between fire and grass starters. Apparently, no love for water starters from me, which I think is fascinating.
Interesting.
But okay, so Kanto, I picked Bulbasaur, obviously.
Bulbasaur.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. When I was a kid, it was like, oh man, it's dual type, and you get an advantage on the first two gyms. And I wanted easy mode.
Yes.
And then as I grew older, I was like, oh, Bulbasaur, better than that. In much the same way as I thought it was better than Pokemon. But as an adult, I go, no, Bulbasaur's freaking awesome, man.
He is one of my favorites of the originals for sure. If I had to pick one Pokemon above all others, he'd probably be the one.
Yeah, is he statistically the best? No, screw it. I love him. Bulbasaur all the way up to Venusaur, the whole evolutionary line. And that's the other thing, too. You know, you can love the initial version, but if you don't love the whole line. So, like, yeah, Bulbasaur all the way.
Well, yeah, and also, like, he's the only one that doesn't have an awkward, like, teenager phase. Like, both Charmeleon and Wartortle are just, like, eh. Like, they don't look great. Their stats aren't great. Like, but
they also... also Ivysaur shows a little bit of change.
Yeah.
Wartortle's like, yeah, definitely bigger. It's got more of an expression. Weird ears though.
Yeah.
And Charmeleon is just like, okay, yeah, that is awkward teenage Charmander. It's just kind of bigger.
Yeah.
But like Bulbasaur has the seed on its back and it's blooming and I'm into it.
For Johto, we both skipped, which works out perfectly. So we don't have to pick that one.
I do have a copy. I just recently got Soul Silver. So I'm like starting to play it, and I actually picked Chikorita.
Cool.
But that's for a bunch of reasons.
Sure. And so now I played Omega Ruby, but you never played Ruby, correct?
I do have Alpha Sapphire, but I gave myself the misfortune of buying it 2 days before Pokemon Sun arrived at my door. So I have it, but I started it. But I need to finish it.
Yeah. So I picked Torchic in that generation.
I picked Mudkip.
Yeah. I mean, do you like Mudkips, bro?
I do. Let me show you my Pokemons.
So yeah, I picked Torchic that generation, and then on to Sinnoh, I picked Chimchar.
One of the selling points to me of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl was being shown the starters and going, are you telling me I get to be a goddamn penguin? Piplup.
Yeah.
I named him Mr. Fix-It. I love him.
I didn't ask you that. Yeah. Do you change Pokemon names or keep them the same?
I changed some names.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk about Nuzlocke runs when we're done with this, with the starter chat, because that also is another interesting facet of Pokemon games. I usually, if I change a name, it's someone that I know is going to be part of my party.
Yeah.
I certainly in Pokemon Sun and Moon, when I caught Pokemon, I went, oh, you are going to be a fixture. I gave them names.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But and especially nowadays, because it's easier to know which Pokemon is which. In early generations with the limitations of the technology, when you would open up the Pokemon box and it would just be a list of names, if it wasn't their species name and you couldn't remember which Pokemon it was, you ran into a lot of issues.
Right.
So it's much easier now to give your Pokemon names.
Yeah, I have this weird...
And attach personalities.
I have this weird thing where I don't like renaming things in RPGs, except for RPGs I've played multiple times. Like Chrono Trigger, every time I start a new game of Chrono Trigger, I never keep the regular names. I always rename the characters to friends of mine, just because I think it's fun. Yeah. Except for Frog, I always name Glenn, because he's my favorite character, and fuck, he's Glenn.
That's who he is.
That's his name.
That's it. That's who he is. That's what he's called. Well, also Pokemon, it's not a thing of like, okay, you're playing Chrono Trigger, rename him Chrono. You're not playing Final Fantasy IX. No, he's Zidane. That's his name, and we're just giving him goofball names. Like, okay, do you call every dog you see dog? Do you call
Right.
every tiger you see tiger? Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
But if they were your companion, you might be encouraged to give them a name.
Yeah.
And some people do name their cat's cat. I mean, I've seen Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Right, exactly.
But so there's again, in that same way, if they can get away with a lot more characters that per se to your party, it allows you to either name, or you could go like, I just like what they're called.
Yeah.
It's funny that way.
It's funny. Your reaction to Piplup was pretty much my reaction to Chimchar. Like, so you're telling me I can have a monkey that's also a fire monkey that eventually becomes a firefighting monkey? Where's the downside?
Well, I mean, this was before we got firefighting fatigue.
Right, that's for sure. And so on to Unova. I picked Tepig again, fire.
And that's when I got on the firefighting train. I liked Tepig. It was a pro wrestler like fire pig.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. How could you not? In Kalos, I picked Chespin mostly because he just looked adorable. But Chestnut is one of the best final form Pokemon. I don't care who you are. So that's who I picked from that generation.
I named mine Juggernaut.
Nice. Excellent. So you picked Chespin as well.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting with X and Y. I played through the whole game, and then I started a new game, and I was like, all right, let's do this whole Greninja thing that everyone's into. I'm probably going to start again because I don't like him as much. Yeah. I miss my Chestnut.
Yeah, he was my favorite.
It's a thing, yeah.
In the Alolan region, I picked Rowlet because he's a round owl.
As did I.
He's a round owl.
Because he's adorable. He's a little round. Yes.
He's the best.
Like, the other starters are great. They're wonderful, whatever their names are. But no, I know it's Litten and Poplio, but also excellent. And again, Litten in its whole evolutionary line is great. It becomes a big, crazy heel wrestler.
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome. But it's not my ghost type owl archer.
Right. Exactly.
Come on.
Well, it's funny. So for the later generations, we pretty much lined up every time. So now I'm curious. So before we go talking about Nuzlocke to round out the show,
Grookey.
We are on
Grookey.
Oh, are you picking Grookey? Wow.
Oh, I am like, I have not looked at any leaks of what the evolutionary line is. I don't need this to be colored. I am picking Grookey. I am taking my silly little drummer monkey.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I was Score Bunny the whole way, and then you pointed out that Grookey might be a drummer, and I'm having second thoughts. Also, like, I thought Grookey's design was awkward, but the more I look at it, the more it feels less awkward. Also, like, Score Bunny reminds me of the jock in high school. I don't know why. Like, just his whole motif.
I think it's styled more after like a European football player, soccer player.
Yeah, for sure. But
it's got the jock look.
But as a music nerd, like you said, well, he's gonna be a drummer. Obviously, I went, God damn it.
Yeah, he's a groovy monkey. He's a Grookey. So I mean, Sobble also is adorable, and Score Bunny like. I'm looking forward to playing through the game and seeing where it all goes.
For sure. So you heard it here, folks. I might be having second thoughts about my starter and might be going from Score Bunny to Grookey. However, as a continued tradition, fuck water type. I don't actually mean that, but like clearly I don't have any desire to play a water type Pokemon, which is very odd to me because I didn't do that with intent. Like I wasn't just like screw all water type. I just happened to pick those other types.
Yeah, it's interesting what you show and what you choose like that. And yeah, it's not necessarily, no, screw that one. I'm not doing that. But then you're like, oh, I guess I don't do that often. I actually don't usually put fire types in my party.
Really?
I don't have, unless they're my starter. Like the occasional one, but like fire types in general aren't necessarily my favorites. Or I like them, but then something else is like, oh, that's taking a party slot. I need that.
Yeah.
And then they're an afterthought often.
Yeah.
Which is why I once played through Pokemon Leaf Green, the Game Boy Advance re-release of Gen 1. I did a run where I used nothing but fire types just to kind of like get a feel for them.
Sure.
And I enjoyed it, but
I will say, now that I think about it, especially since we're probably going to talk about Pokemon a lot more in the months to come, since we're both going to be playing the new one from the start, which we haven't really done together since we've been podcasting. Maybe for the sake of diversity, I will stick with Scorbunny, because he was my first it was my first choice. He's what I thought. He's hopefully not another firefighting, but I'll stick with my instinct and stick with my first choice. If I regret it later, so be it.
I've been really wanting Scorbunny to become a fire flying type.
That would be awesome.
And especially because of these and again, this is all speculation. I look forward to being proven so freaking wrong. But Scorbunny, if Scorbunny is being based off of like football players, off of soccer players, A, big high jumping kicks, and B, selling like being tapped and then like jumping backwards and I'm so hurt. Watching gifs of like the World Cup and men's World Cup, like selling, being tapped. I'm like, yeah, that's a flying type right there. That's its own little like dig, but it's also diversity. I like it
for sure.
That's what I want it to be. It's probably not, but that's what I've wanted.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense.
But speaking of favorite types and everything, Matt, do you have a favorite Pokemon type?
It's tough. It's tough. Like for me, types almost seem secondary to the Pokemon themselves. I mean, I'm kind of superficial. If they look goofy or they look awesome, like I tend to like them best. I think my favorite type is probably Ghost, because I think beyond beyond Bulbasaur rather, Gengar happens to be one of my favorite Pokemon, and his whole line from Ghastly to Haunter to Gengar, I really love. I would say a close second is probably Poison, because I love me coughing / wheezing, and the Galar region wheezing is absolutely amazing and insensitive.
It's such a delight. No, and actually Bulbasaur is also a poison type, and poison is my favorite type.
Interesting. It's funny how we align without having pre-discussed any of this. I think
I know really it's weird. Well, and it was one of those sort of things where you feel certain affinities for stuff, and it's not like I do nothing but poison, but I noticed that poison types end up in my party most of the time. And whether it's a design thing, whether it's a stats thing, whether it's a whatever, I'm like, and especially when I played through Sun and Moon, when I saw the Alolan Muck, that was one that I caught the Grimer and gave it a name, because it's like, you're coming with me, buddy. You rainbow sludge pile. Yes. And also poison. I've definitely done poison only runs on Pokemon, and those are always such a delight. And I would say poison is probably my favorite type. And this is why I said, like, you can have a whole litany of different favorites, because Farfetch'd is a normal type Pokemon. It's my favorite Pokemon, just design, silliness, and everything else. I love it. But yeah, poison's probably my favorite type. I have a well-tended, competitive-ish team on my copy of Pokemon X that my friend Sherwin, who introduced me to Pokemon Shuffle, helped me breed a team with like perfect IVs of bug and poison and grass.
Oh wow!
I think its centralized theme is bug, but it's like all sorts of baton pass, U-turn, like quick, all sorts of weirdness. And that's another aspect. I did say before that Pokemon is a series that can be very boiled down and modulated to a different genre, but also every generation they've added more and more like big, wild, weird numbers to it. I mean, the second generation of Pokemon introduced breeding, so you can take Pokemon you like, and sometimes depending upon if they're holding items or not holding items, they'll start with certain moves. They'll start with the potential to have higher stats than others. In Generation 4, they introduced effort values, where based on the Pokemon you battle, your team will have stat growth increased in one area or another. You fight fast Pokemon, you get faster, kind of thing, to oversimplify it. So you can sit there and one can play through the main story and pick their favorites and keep type advantage in mind. Water beats fire, flying beats fighting, that kind of thing, and do well for yourself. But then there are people who do competitive battling. Also, watching world tournaments of Pokemon is kind of amazing because the thought process is like, yeah, I would have never considered this. You know, you play the game by yourself. You typically don't hold on to the moves that raise your stats because you're like, why raise stats when I can just kill?
Right.
But when you're facing human opponents, there's a lot more thought process involved. There's setups that you need to do. There's mind games you need to play. There's hazards you need to set up and traps to lay. So, like, that was the first generation. I was like, let me have a competitive team somehow. And I suppose this is a testament to the series, and it's the fact that something I wanted to mention is the fact that as a collector, Pokemon is kind of delightfully infuriating because you are able to, because the trading mechanic has been there since Pokemon Red and Blue. Got to catch them all. Either have both games in 2 Game Boys, which I do, or which I can do now as an adult. But as a kid, it's like, you know, you got to trade with your friends at school. But they updated sort of the trading mechanics in certain aspects of the Pokemon themselves, of the data, so that you can only trade Generation 3 onwards.
Right.
But that still means from Game Boy Advance up to 3DS, you can, and some do, you can take a Pokemon from your copy of Ruby and Sapphire, which was released. I'm going to look up when it was released so I can really lay this down. But when you can take a Pokemon from there and trade them all the way up. You can, in fact, trade them up to your 3DS copy of Alpha Sapphire Omega Ruby.
Oh, wow.
And so you can, in fact, go from Gen 3 to Gen 3, or Gen 6, Gen 3, you know?
Yeah.
And you can also do the same thing for using Pokemon Bank and other, side things and whatnot. You can take Pokemon from a game released in 2002 all the way up to definitely ones released in 2017.
Wow.
And potentially, I don't know how it all is working out right now, you know, on the day this episode is released and the Sword and Shield coming out. You could potentially get it to a game in 2019. They'll probably figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of times when a game comes out and it has iterative versions, the old ones are left in the dust. Like, good luck getting money selling your last year sports game. But Pokemon, even if the story is essentially the same, or they've all run out of originality in how they design their Pokemon, which, screw you, we started off with a rock with arms. Look,
yeah.
It's a dead meme that every generation has brilliance and idiocy, and I love it.
Yep.
You know, fuck you, I love Trubbish.
I love my ice cream Pokemon. I don't care what you say.
Exactly. So with that level of, you know, iterativeness and innovation wrapped within each other, that it is a yin and yang for this franchise, that older versions do not depreciate in value. You go to a GameStop, and now that a bunch of the GameStops are selling a very small selection of retro games in a grab to stay relevant and afloat, which I'm not complaining. I'm able to get games again, but I could tell you right now, there's a copy of Pokemon Fire Red for the Game Boy Advance, a game over 15 years old, for $50.
Yep.
And that is a competitive price, and that is not fleecing the customer necessarily. Now, Pokemon Red on the Game Boy, that's $15, $20, but also it's well known that it is difficult to go back to those games without nostalgia glasses.
That is true. Yeah, for sure.
But it's remarkable that because of the fact that you can, you know, catch them all, you can transfer back and forth, you still have favorites. There's, you know, the experiences are still relevant in their own way, that it's a series that hasn't, economically speaking, depreciated. And in some cases, it's gotten buying a new used copy of Heart Gold and Soul Silver it's more expensive than it was. As one who recently got Soul Silver, you're dealing closer to $60 for that. Not necessarily, but it's anywhere from $45 to $60 depending upon what you're getting, because people still go back to those experiences. And it's the same reason why buying a copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee for the GameCube is such an expensive proposition. It's not because it's a rare game. It's because people don't get rid of their old copies because they love it so much. Whether it's nostalgia, whether it is genuine love, whether it is rediscovery, whether it is completionism, it is... I don't think it's going anywhere. And it's one of those great ironies of remembering how Pokemon was seen when it first reached America as a fad. And that is a known thing, but it is still so goddamn funny to be like, yep, it's a fad. It's going to go away any day now.
Any day now.
I think it's any day now.
I think it's also funny that you talk about like collecting being why it drives you, and why it drives a lot of the people who play these games, and that the Nuzlocke community is the complete antithesis of what Pokemon is meant to be. For those who are not familiar,
love Nuzlocke runs. I love playing those.
So for those who are not familiar with what a Nuzlocke run is, Geoff, why don't you explain it and talk a little bit about it?
Gladly. And as I said about like single player games, one can make their way through nice and easy, but people like Pokemon and people like putting self-imposed challenges on the game to gain a new appreciation. Some people will do mono type runs where they will only catch one type of Pokemon, which is fun. What a Nuzlocke run is it has some various rules, but they essentially boil down to this. Anytime a Pokemon faints, you can no longer use it. Like you either release it or you put it in a box that you never take anything out of. When it is spent, it is spent. If it has a couple of hit points left, you can heal it up, of course. You're allowed to heal it. And people sometimes say no healing items. Sometimes it's no Pokemon centers, whatever it is. But once it runs out of hit points, you can no longer use it. The other is you can only attempt to catch the first new Pokemon you encounter in an area. So if you've caught a Pidgey in one area, you go to the next one, the first Pokemon you encounter is a Pidgey, you don't try to catch that one. But then you find a Nidoran, well, you're going to try to catch that one. And I say attempt, which is if you can catch that first one you encounter, you can now use it. If you miss that specific one, you can't catch anything else in that route. If you catch that one, you can't catch anything else in that route. That is your one shot per area. So this means you have a limited number of Pokemon you can use. You can grind and level them up as much as you want, whatever else. And again, some people do variations on the fact. And one of the like non-enforced but like rules, name all your Pokemon, because you are really going to feel it when you lose them. You are really going to feel it when they triumph. You are going to gain an appreciation for Pokemon you would have normally just passed over because, well, you normally really like getting, whatever it is in this area, but you caught a Geodude. Get into Graveler, buddy. And it allows you to, you can lose at this. Because if you run out of Pokemon, you've run out of Pokemon. Start again. So it gives you a new appreciation for challenge, a new appreciation for strategy, of course, but it gives you a new appreciation for the various Pokemon in that generation, in that region, because, some people really like Raticate, and I do know a few who do, but maybe if you didn't, well, that Rattata survived for a while, and like whatever, trash Pokemon, as you might think of, are suddenly linchpins of your team. One of the reasons why I chose Chikorita for my Soul Silver run is one of the fun things with Nuzlocks is what a delightful spectator sport they can be. And there's several people that I follow on YouTube that have done Nuzlocke runs that are so much fun to watch. Joe Cat, who makes the Crap Guide to D&D videos, is doing a platinum Nuzlocke run, and it's so much fun to watch. Team 4-Star, the group of folks behind Dragon Ball Abridged, have done several Nuzlocke runs, and their Soul Silver run is delightful, and they use a random number to choose which starter they have, and they picked Chikorita, which is, known to be the worst one. They hated this thing so much. They called it a mistake, so they named him Mr. Steak. And he became the star of their team.
Sure.
He refused to die. And he ended up he was on their final team. He was their mascot. He was their favorite. And I was just like, you know what? I just like how Meganium looks. It's another blooming flower. That's cool. I'm gonna play Chikorita. So my run currently has Fat Pony.
Nice.
That's his name.
It's funny also, what Nuzlocke reminds me of is when we talked about in our JRPG episodes is when you become super familiar with a lot of JRPGs, because the mechanics stay pretty standard, especially if you're playing the same game multiple times, is that you create your own challenges, like we talked about the No Materia run in Final Fantasy VII, things like that don't break the game, but they definitely make it harder. And I like that Pokemon is just another JRPG that gives you that kind of diversity, and Nuzlocke runs are just another version of that. I've never attempted to play one. I have watched other people. Not for me. I am already not an elite gamer. I don't need to hamstring myself some more. But I always find it really fascinating because I think it's such a great idea. Also, this idea that these creatures died. They're not fainting, essentially. You can't use them anymore. And
you've retired them one way or the other.
Right. I know someone who did a Nuzlocke run and named, I think you could, I can't remember. Can you name the boxes in any of the games?
Yeah, you can. In the later ones, you can rename the boxes.
Right. So they named the box with all the fainted Pokemon Graveyard. I was like, that's rough.
Yeah. Graveyard, Crypt, Afterlife. You can call them all sorts of things. And that's the other thing with Pokemon, because yes, nowadays each Pokemon, there's a little thing of this particular one's personality, but you're still applying sort of what happens to the story. How they overcome odds, you attribute that, you put yourself into the story. And now that you can more customize your protagonist, you can either choose to make your Pokemon trainer a completely different character. If you... my original Pokemon X run, I made a girl protagonist, and it was just this is her journey. This is not Geoff as a 12-year-old playing Pokemon. This is the separate character. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that story and how it all played out with a female protagonist.
Sure.
And some people and some games, sometimes you do just go, all right, this one is specifically me.
Yeah.
Pokemon Sun, I made a pale redhead because I thought a pale redhead running around Hawaii was hilarious.
It is pretty funny.
And so you are allowed a level of integration or distance, of customization, or I don't know, whatever it is. And so you can the joy of Pokemon, and it's the joy of a lot of different series and a lot of different games, and open world and not, is you choose how you interface and interact with it. And it's one that, due to the fact that I have met children that love Pokemon and have never played the video game, but they have binders of Pokemon cards.
Sure.
And you're able to translate moves and styles from that. There's the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. There's Pokemon Snap. There's even different genres have chosen how to interface with Pokemon. And whether it's the best RPG ever or it is the everything wrong with video games, it's everywhere, and I like it.
Yeah, I think it's clear at this point in the episode that me and Geoff are both big Pokemon fans. I think we were both pretty clear that our favorite game was X, or Y, if you will. So we, as always, pass it on to you, listener. What's your favorite Pokemon game? What's your favorite Pokemon or type? Do you hate Pokemon? If so, tell us why. Have you played the games and just don't like them? Do you hate them from afar, which people are wont to do? Tell us what Pokemon means to you, because it's one of the longer running video game series that's had an impact on a lot of other places and has had rip-offs and spin-offs and things that are similar and different. And so we always like to hear what y'all think about the things we talk about.
Yeah, because the fact that it is so pervasive means you have your personal experience with it. What's your favorite type? What's your favorite Pokemon? Why is Pokken Tournament the greatest fighting game ever, or not? Whatever it is, because it's your experience and it's your part of gaming history, and we want to hear about it. We want to talk about it because this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.